Welcome everyone to the Kentucky Kid. I'm your host Kelly Berry. A lot to talk about today. First though, a story that to be quite honest, I didn't really want to talk about, but felt like I needed to since it was a big topic in sports that's been addressed quite a bit. Earlier this week, following the draft, Tim Tebow was cut by the New York Jets, and it sparked a lot of interest and conversation. There's been debates that he might be able to find another job in the NFL. There's been talks that he might have to change positions to do that. There have been talks that regardless of what he decides to do, he will never be that great of a player. But I don't really think this should be a story, and here's why. First and foremost, the guy is a backup. Okay, he threw 8 passes last year and only ran the ball 32 times. So he was a key player in 40 plays over a 16-game season. Basically, he didn't play. And frankly, second of all, we should have all seen this coming anyway. Because the Jets had 5 quarterbacks on their roster. Mark Sanchez, team starter last year. Geno Smith, new draftee. Tim Tebow, Greg McElroy, and they signed another guy, I believe it was like Matt Sean or something like that. Can't remember the 5th guy, but they had a lot of quarterbacks on their roster. And it would be insane to think that they could keep all of them. Now, we knew they were going to keep Sanchez because nobody's going to trade for him to pick up his salary, and it would cost them so much guaranteed money, $17 million over the next 2 years, to just cut him right now. It wouldn't make any sense. They're not going to get rid of Geno Smith because they just drafted the guy. And they're probably not going to get rid of McElroy because he's at least proven, unlike Tebow, that he can at least throw the ball. Because when you boil it down, I know Tebow's a hard worker. I know he's the first guy on the field at practice and the last guy to leave. But he still sucks. Okay? And that's been proven by his tape. There's been a lot of debate, and I addressed this before, that maybe he could switch positions. And up until recently, I thought he could succeed in doing that. But I've switched my opinion. He's the first person on the field, last person to leave, right? Means he's a hard worker. And usually hard workers can succeed at whatever they do. Tim Tebow can't. Because he's been working hard as a quarterback for a long time. And since he's been working this hard at the same position for years, and he's still not that good, what makes anyone in their right mind think that he can suddenly switch positions and in an instant be decent at that position? It's unreasonable. But even worse than Tim Tebow as a player was the way in which the Jets handled the acquisition of Tebow. Now, I don't have a problem with them cutting him. That's not my issue, all right? I'm not one of those diehard Tim Tebow fans that spends 15 minutes on my pillow every night crying myself to sleep because they cut him. I'm not. But the way that they got him and then the way that they used him is ridiculous. All right, you don't give up 2 draft picks in the same year or any year for a punt cover guy. You just don't. Okay, he was brought in to be a situational quarterback, red zone primarily. That was the selling point. All right, you bring in Tony Sparano, who came from Miami, who was known for using the Wildcat formation, especially in the red zone or on short yardage situations, and that's what we all thought the Jets were going to do with Tony Sparano as their new offensive coordinator when they got Tim Tebow, right? That's what we all thought. It didn't happen. Then maybe we thought, I don't know, they could bring him in as maybe a backup tight end, backup running back, I don't know, something. But they ended up using him as nothing more than a punt blocker. And I don't care how good you are as a punt blocker, giving up 2 draft picks for that just does not make any sense at all. Speaking of poorly handled situations in the NFL, the draft was up, and frankly, there were a lot more teams I thought that had good or at least solid drafts as opposed to the ones that had really bad ones. But there were two teams in particular that stuck out to me that just had abysmal drafts. The first, and this is the one that a lot of people have been talking about, has been the Buffalo Bills. And the reason a lot of people dislike this draft is because of their first pick in E.J. Manuel with the 16th overall selection. E.J. Manuel may be or may not be a good pro. Okay? He's got a lot of good intangibles. He's very elusive in the pocket, and he can make some good decisions. But he can also, and he's been known to do this a lot, make really, really poor decisions, throw off his back foot a lot, and force a lot of balls into double and triple and sometimes even quadruple coverage, and thus throw a lot of interceptions. But regardless of whether or not he's going to be a good or not good pro, that's left to be seen. What we do know now is that he was the fourth or maybe fifth best rated quarterback to come out of this draft, and yet he was the first one taken. And the reason I bring this up is because of this. Matt Barkley was a consensus second best quarterback behind Geno Smith by almost every single draft expert there is before the draft started, okay? He was considered to be the second best quarterback in this draft. You know when he was taken? 4th round. First overall pick in that round, but nonetheless 4th round. And I bring this up for this reason. If the Bills were really sold on E.J. Manuel being the future of their franchise, that's fine. Pick him. But pick him where he deserves to be picked. They could have gotten this guy midway through the 4th round, maybe even as late as the 5th round. Because the second best quarterback in this draft went in first overall in the 4th round. Remember the old saying? The right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. And that applies here with Manuel. Because yes, he may be their future quarterback. And yes, he could be a good one. But yes, also, they could have gotten him as late as 4 rounds later. Another team that had a weak draft, and this might come as a surprise to a few people, the Cincinnati Bengals. Their first overall pick concerned me in Tyler Eifert. Okay? Eifert is a good tight end. The best one to come out of this draft, and probably one of the best to come out of the draft since Jimmy Graham at that position. Nonetheless, your first overall pick needs to fill a need. And the tight end is not a need for this team. They already have Jermaine Gresham. Now, you might say, a 2 tight end scheme has worked in the past with teams like the Colts when they had Peyton Manning, and the Patriots now. Why not just plug him in and have a 2 tight end system? A 2 tight end system will not work here. And here's why. What did the Colts and what do the Patriots have now that the Cincinnati Bengals do not? A future Hall of Fame quarterback. You need a really, really good quarterback to make a 2 tight end system work. And here's why. A 2 tight end system targets the heart of the defense. All right, right smack in the middle of the defense is where you're attacking. And when you attack in an area of the defense that has the most players in that area, you need a quarterback that more than anything else is able to break down a defense. And I don't think that Andy Dalton is good enough, because Andy Dalton is not on the decision-making level that Peyton Manning is and that Tom Brady is. A 2 tight end system simply will not work here. It's a wasted pick to get a tight end in the first pick with your draft. But their second pick in Giovanni Bernard was almost just as bad. And again, much like Manuel, I don't think that he's a bad player. All right, he's a running back from North Carolina, ran for well over 1,000 yards last season. Okay, good player. But he wasn't the best running back available. In fact, there were probably at least 2 or 3 other running backs that were better than him that were still on the board. Eddie Lacy being one of them, Monte Ball being another, and you could even argue a guy like Jonathan Franklin. It'd be a little bit of a stretch, but you could argue it. Okay, Bernard may be a good pro. He may be a great pro. But again, much like Manuel, the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. They could have waited at least another round to pick up this guy, and instead used their second pick in that draft to fill another need. But with both of their picks to start, they failed to do that. Well, that's the bad news. And unlike last week, we got through the yucky stuff at first, and now I'm going to move on to dessert later, a more typical meal, if you will. There were a lot of good drafts this year, and frankly, there were so many that I'm not going to be able to address them all. What I am going to do is give you 5 good ones that I thought just really, really did what those teams needed to do in the draft. And the first one is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This isn't going to go in any particular order from best to worst or anything like that. But the Pittsburgh Steelers was the first draft that really stood out to me as filling needs. James Harrison's gone. Great outside linebacker, no longer with the team, and in fact, with division rival, the Cincinnati Bengals. They land that 17th pick in the draft, and Jarvis Jones is still there. And let me tell you something, that is going to be a great, great fit for this team, because he plays a lot like James Harrison. You know, that blood-seeking mentality of getting after whoever has the ball. And there's been a lot of criticism with Jarvis Jones that he's only a one-gear player. Fine. That's fine by me, because that one gear got him 86 tackles and 14.5 sacks on a team that had 8 defensive players drafted off of the Georgia Bulldogs. 8 of them. So on a team's defense that had an enormous amount of talent, he still posted numbers like this with that one gear. That one gear was perfectly good enough for him. But then with their second pick, they get Le'Veon Bell. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have been known in the past for succeeding most when they have smash-mouth running backs. Le'Veon Bell is not a guy that can run past really almost anybody, although he has some elusive speed. What he does have, what he does possess, is a smash-mouth running mentality. He's a high durability guy. He ran for 382 carries last year. Not yards, carries. That's how many times he ran the ball last year in their 13 games. 382 times. Nearly 30 touches per contest. He also posted nearly 1,800 yards. So we're not just talking about a guy that can run a lot. We're talking about a guy that can run well and then finish in the red zone with 12 touchdowns. Another pick for them that really stood out to me was Landry Jones. Now, this is not a team that needs a starting quarterback, all right? They already have a very, very good one in Ben Roethlisberger. What they need are some backups, okay? Their backups right now are Byron Leftwich and Charlie Batch, and those 2 guys are old. Combined age of 71. Byron Leftwich is 33. He's the youngest of the 2. And to give you an idea of how old Charlie Batch is, I have a retro Madden game, 2001, for the Nintendo 64, and he's still on it. He's still on it. The guy is 38 years old. All right, those 2 guys aren't going to be in the league much longer. And so Pittsburgh needed to go out and get another solid backup quarterback that plays a lot like Big Ben, and Landry Jones fits the bill. Another team I thought had a phenomenal draft was the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans' main problem last year was this. They lacked versatility. They lacked balance, okay? And I'm not talking about balance in terms of rushing yards as opposed to passing yards. That they were fine. In fact, they were the most balanced team last year, or one of them at least, in that regard. Their problem with balance was they only had one decent target in the wide receiving core in Andre Johnson, and only one significant pass rusher in J.J. Watt. And the Texans addressed both of those issues in the draft. First, they get Hopkins, wide receiver out of Clemson. And this guy last year, 82 catches, 1,405 yards, and 18 touchdowns. If he can keep up any kind of production similar to this in the NFL, and I realize his numbers are going to drop off some because there's a difference between ACC defenses and NFL defenses. But still, if a guy can come into the NFL and produce right away, it will take some of the edge off of Andre Johnson being the sole target in the passing game. And Sam Montgomery, defensive end out of LSU, might be able to take some of the edge off of J.J. Watt. Because what teams did a lot last year was they just doubled up J.J. Watt and had one-on-one blocking everywhere else. And it worked. It worked. I don't think you can do that now because Sam Montgomery is good enough to beat a one-on-one in the NFL. All right, yes, the guy only had 37 tackles last year. He wasn't a high-end tackler, but he got in the backfield a lot. He registered 8 sacks last season. And if he can carry over that kind of production, much like Hopkins taking off the edge of Johnson, Montgomery can take a lot of the pressure and a lot of the edge off of J.J. Watt. So I've already talked about the Steelers, and I've already talked about the Texans having a good draft. Another team that really addressed a lot of their needs was the Arizona Cardinals. The thing that characterized the Arizona Cardinals team last season was their inability to run the football. They ranked dead last year running the ball, only averaging 75 yards a game. Their leading rusher only ran for 356 yards last season. That's absolutely terrible. One of the worst that I've seen in a long time in terms of rushing teams. They go out and with their first pick, they get Jonathan Cooper, an offensive guard from North Carolina. Bruce Arians, head coach, coming from being the offensive coordinator at Indianapolis last season to now being the head coach at Arizona, said before this draft that he felt like he was one good offensive lineman away from having a great offensive line. And I think that Jonathan Cooper fills that spot. He now gives them hope to be able to run the ball inside. Another guy that gives them hope to run the ball inside is a running back, Stephon Taylor. And like I said, LaRod Stephen Howlings, there we go, ran for 356 yards last season and was the leading rusher on that team. Stephon Taylor last year at Stanford ran for over 1,500 yards. Okay, they're bringing in a guy that can block on the inside of the line, and then they're also bringing in a guy in Taylor who can run the ball inside. Love the combination. While I don't think that Cooper was the best offensive guard available at the time, I think Warmack was from Alabama, but that's just my personal opinion. They were really very, very close in talent. What I do think they did effectively, they being the Cardinals, is addressed needs by getting high-end quality players. They also got 2 guys on the defensive side, in Kevin Minter and Tyrann Mathieu, that I think complement this team very, very well. Now, Minter is not the quickest guy in the world from the inside linebacker spot. He only runs a 4.77 40. But what he does is he sheds blocks well, he wraps up, and he has all sorts of other intangibles, and that's exemplified by the fact that he posted 130 tackles last season. Tyrann Mathieu is a guy with a lot of potential, but also a troubled past with his drug history, and that's what got him suspended from LSU, I believe, twice. Okay, he was suspended, then he got reinstated, and then he was suspended again. At least that's to my knowledge. But having former teammates there, Kevin Minter this past season and the year before, great corner Patrick Peterson, I think will help him. Okay, because both of those guys are now on the Cardinals. That to me is a good pick. You're not just picking up a good player, but you're picking up a good player, yes, with a previous problem, but he also has players around him, and he's coming into a team that has players around him that can help him in the future stay out of those problems. Another team that absolutely killed it, I've already mentioned, just going back, the Steelers, the Texans, just recently the Cardinals, keep it in division with the San Francisco 49ers. And it's scary to think that they had a really good draft because they were just one more possession in an incredible second half comeback away from winning the Super Bowl last year. It's hard to imagine this team getting better than that. I'm not sure if they got better, but they got as good as they possibly could with this draft. They had 11 picks in this draft. 3 of those picks were defensive ends. And that replenishes an aging position. All right. They run a 3-4 defense, still uses 2 defensive ends. And one of them, Justin Smith, is 33 years old. He doesn't have a lot of productive years left in the NFL, right? But adding 3 defensive ends replenishes that position and allows those guys to gain quality experience and learn from guys like Justin Smith. And then when they exit the league, those 3 guys coming up will be ready to battle for his spot that he had previously. Then they also pick up 2 guys that really stand out to me in Eric Reid and Marcus Lattimore. Eric Reid may have not been the best safety to get, but I think he's a safety that best fits the playing style. Deshaun Golston was the safety for the 49ers Super Bowl team last season. He's gone. He's at the Buccaneers now. Eric Reid, while probably not being as good as Matt Elam at the position, is not much worse and plays like Golston does a lot more than Matt Elam does. So while it's not the best pick, it's the best fit. But I have to love the selection of Marcus Lattimore. San Francisco does not need another running back. Okay? But when you get that late in the draft, and he was selected in the 4th round, when you get that late in the draft, what you're looking for is not necessarily to fill needs like you are in rounds 1, 2, and 3, but really just looking for guys that are the best available. Marcus Lattimore was the best available. All right? I heard a sports analyst say he's got a 1st round heart with a 7th round knee. Okay, the dude absolutely blew out his knee last year in a game against Tennessee, tore 3 ligaments in his knee, one of them being the ACL. But he's had a great rehab in the offseason. He's continuing to show signs of improvement, and he has time to develop, considering that the 49ers already have a loaded backfield. And in addition to that, the offensive line is good enough to where once he does finally get to where he can play, he can have an immediate impact and then perhaps be sent off elsewhere as trade bait. It's a great, great fit for him, and it's a great, great fit for the team. Speaking of the team, though, the team that absolutely knocked their draft out of the park, by far and away, without question, the best draft this year, has to go undoubtedly to the St. Louis Rams. Okay, this is a team that just absolutely killed it. They got 2 great wide receivers and 2 great wide receivers that played on the same team. Okay, 2 guys that have a previous chemistry that can immediately be applied to the NFL from day one. Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, both from the University of West Virginia. The Rams' main weakness offensively was that they lacked playmakers. And their 2 best ones, Steven Jackson, running back, and Danny Amendola, wide receiver, are both gone. What these 2 guys bring to the table is an immediate impact. They combined last season, get this, 228 receptions between the two of them, 2,911 yards, and 37 touchdowns in a single season for just two players. I bet the happiest guy on that team right now is Sam Bradford, because he was simply begging last year for somebody to throw the ball to, and now he has not just one great guy, but two of them. But I also have to like the pick at 30th overall in the first round with Alec Ogletree. And this is a guy, in my opinion, who was the best interior linebacker. Now, all character issues aside, this guy can play. Alright, he had 112 tackles last season. And like I said with Jarvis Jones, okay, Georgia's defense had a lot of players. So to get that many tackles, one thing is good in and of itself. But to get that many tackles on a team that has a lot of other guys that are making a lot of tackles, that says something completely above and beyond just the number itself. He's a great guy, and just like Tavon Austin and Sedmon Bailey can come in and make an impact right away on a defense that, much like its offense, lacked playmakers. But I have to like the addition, too, of the most underrated offensive lineman in Barrett Jones. Okay, and this is a guy who broke the record in college football for the most, let me see if I can word this right. He is the only player in BCS history, in college football history, to start and win 3 different championships, 3 different BCS championships, while playing 3 different positions. His freshman year, I believe he started offensive tackle. His junior season, it was guard, and then last year it was center. He's a versatile guy who can play anywhere on the offensive line, but probably has found his home at center. But nonetheless, just like he did at Alabama, he can anchor this Rams offensive line right away. But I also like the addition of Zach Stacy, running back from Vanderbilt. And this is a power running back who can come in and replace the running style that Steven Jackson left behind. Like I said, power running back, but also a lot of results. Ran for over 1,100 yards in each of his last 2 seasons on a team that really didn't have that good of an offensive line. And the biggest thing about him, though, is that he reminds me a lot of Eddie George, former running back at the Tennessee Titans. And Jeff Fisher has to love that comparison, especially considering that Fisher used to coach at Tennessee for Eddie George and had a lot of success with George running that style. So again, a lot of teams had good draft picks, not just these 5, but they were the 5 to me that stuck out more so than any of the others. That's the NFL, and that's a sport that's being talked about a lot just because the draft is come and gone, and it's always big news to see what teams do. But keeping it in the world of professional sports, and this is a sport that's still going on but about to wrap up its season, is the NBA. And one of the most accurate quotes that I've ever heard from an NBA season comes from Dwight Howard talking about the Lakers season. He said, quote, "It was really like a nightmare. It felt like one of those dreams where you try and get away from the bad guy, but for some reason he's right there and he just won't leave," close quote. Now, the Lakers were by far and away the biggest disappointment this year in the NBA. It was not even close. This was a team that was supposed to compete for and possibly win the NBA Finals. And not only did they just barely get into the playoffs to begin with, but they get blown out by a Spurs team that's old and beat up and depleted, which was the exact same excuses that the Lakers used and why their season was so bad to begin with. But the Lakers, to me, exemplify a team that just has a lot of interior problems, all right? It's obvious that Mike D'Antoni does not know how to coach 2 bigs on the floor at the same time, all right? Pau Gasol and Dwight Howard just simply did not work at all. But here you have Kobe Bryant coming in, and the Lakers, front office is going to try as much as possible to probably keep Dwight Howard and make him the future face of the franchise. But in comes Kobe Bryant, who is the current head of the franchise, the current face of the franchise, and says that he would rather have Pau Gasol than Dwight Howard. But another situation is it's going to cost the Lakers, with the luxury tax, I believe I heard nearly $100 million just to keep Kobe Bryant on the team. And he may not even be ready to play to start the season, considering he just blew out his Achilles. Again, a lot of interior problems, and I don't see it getting better anytime soon because that roster is old. A lot of them have long contracts that they can't really get out of, they being the Lakers front office. And they have a coach who I don't think really fits the system that the players want to run at all. But they aren't the only Los Angeles team in trouble. The Clippers have dug themselves a grave. Alright, the Clippers are still alive in the playoffs. And it looked like after the first two games, they were just going to run away with the series. Yes, they barely won the first two games in the series against the Grizzlies. But when you win the first two games in a 7-game series, dang it, you're supposed to win the series. But then they lose game 3. And we're like, the way I was thinking was, okay, they'll come back, they'll win game 4, they'll be up 3-1, this series will soon be over. Then the Grizzlies win game 4. I'm thinking, okay, now the Clippers get to go back to the Staples Center, they'll regroup, they'll win game 5. The Grizzlies win game 5. And so now the Clippers have gone from being up 2-0 in a division, or in a series, to being down 3-2, and possibly not have their second best player in Blake Griffin, who may be out with a high ankle sprain. That's a lot of problems. And basically the only way that I see them winning the series now is if Chris Paul goes absolutely berserk over the last 2 games. It can happen, but it's highly unlikely. A couple of other playoff series to note. Two have already ended. The Heat swept the Bucks 4-0. Not really a surprise there. Didn't really see anything outside of a major injury or injuries happen because, I mean, they already lost Dwayne Wade and it didn't really make a difference at all. I mean, the Bucks are just that bad compared to the Heat. And then, as I've previously mentioned, the Spurs have already swept the Lakers. And I think that's really, really good for the Spurs because now they have time to rest before they start playing the series winner between the Warriors and the Nuggets, and I'll get to that series in a minute. The Pacers and Hawks, though, another series much like the Clippers that's starting to slip away from the team that won the first 2 games. Alright, Indiana won game 1 and game 2. And then they went on the road and Atlanta won game 3 and game 4. A road team has yet to lose, or yet to win in this series. And there's an old saying, I kind of think it's bogus, but there's an old saying that says, it's not a series until a road team has won. If that saying is true, then I guess this isn't a series yet because it's a deadlock and no road team has won yet. I still see the Pacers winning that series because I just think when it boils down to it, in a 7-game series, like I've said, the Pacers make you play their style of play, and I don't think the Hawks are good enough to win 2 out of the last 3 playing the Pacers style. They've been good enough or lucky enough to win the previous 2, but I think winning 2 out of the next 3 with possibly 2 games, at least 1, but probably 2 games coming in Indiana, I just don't see it happening. Looking at the 2-7 series, the Celtics stave off elimination in a sweep by winning game 4. I think they're probably done in 5, though, because it's a team that's just frankly old. And the Knicks, while having a couple of old players, are a lot younger and a lot more talented. And usually in a series of 7, the younger and more talented team ends up winning the series. I'm going to say the Knicks win this one in 5. Finally, we come in the East to the Nets and the Bulls. Alright? I said the Nets were going to win in 7. and they got down 3-1. And then they win game 5. And there's a little bit of hope suddenly for Brooklyn. I feel like that should be a song title, Hope for Brooklyn or something. It sounds cool. I'll have to write it over the summer. Anyway, but I'm not singing it on this show. You can forget that. But I think, though, that the Nets can still win this series, but they're only going to win if Joe Johnson and Deron Williams start playing like the stars that they sold themselves to be. It can happen. It's got a slim chance, but I think it can happen. I feel like I'm going to be wrong here, but I'm still going to go with my gut and say the Nets in 7. Because just like every other series I've predicted, I think in the end the better team wins, and right now the Nets are the better team. Switching over to the West, Thunder nearly swept the Rockets, but the Rockets stave off complete elimination and a sweep by winning Game 4. That's fine. Okay. I said there was a slim possibility of the Rockets just pulling off one good game or the Thunder having an off night. And it happened. Okay. Game 4, the Thunder had an off night, and the Rockets played pretty well, and they just happened to squeak out a win. Big deal. Thunder are going to win in 5 because, again, better teams win 7-game series. This isn't like NCAA tournament stuff where you can just get lucky for one game and suddenly, a 15 seed gets into the Sweet 16. The best thing about a best of 7 series is that the best team wins without fail. At least barring any major injury, the Thunder are by far and away the best team. 2-7 series is already decided. The Spurs now get to rest and wait for the winner of the Warriors and the Nuggets. I thought the Nuggets were going to win this series fairly easily. Then they lose a home game and proceed to lose the next 2 games after that, going down 3-1. George Karl has remained calm as their head coach, and they came out and played anything but calm in Game 5. The Nuggets, for lack of a better term, played pissed in Game 5 and eventually won it. They're going to need to win the last 2, though, being down 3-2. Whoever wins Game 6, though, in my opinion, is going to win this series. Game 6 is in Golden State. Golden State, if they are going to win this series, absolutely need to avoid a trip back to Denver. Because if they win it now, they've automatically won. They've gotten that 4 games. Okay, they've won the series 4-2 if that happens. But if they lose, not only have they lost 2 games in a row, they have to go back to the best team, at least at home, with a 38-3 regular season home record, and you've given the Nuggets a boatload of confidence in themselves. That's something that they have to avoid. Me personally, I picked the Nuggets to win this series. I'm not going to change my mind. I think the Nuggets are good enough to win Game 6 on the road despite their road struggles in the regular season, and I think they end up winning this series in 7 games. Another team that's down 3-2, but I think they'll end up winning it in 7, the Los Angeles Clippers. And again, they could be playing without Blake Griffin. I don't want to say it's not going to matter because Blake Griffin is a talented player. But this team, the Clippers, have the best guard in the playoffs, at least in the West, but possibly in the entire playoffs, period. And teams with good guards tend to go far. Teams with good guards that can perform in the clutch, in addition to in the rest of the game, like Chris Paul, tend to go far. They're going to have to win the next 2 games to win it, already being down 3-2 like I said. But I think this is a team, I know this is a team that's good enough to do it because we've seen them do it before. The key for them is to find a way to stop Zach Randolph. Because in the first 2 games, I believe he only averaged 13 a game. And the Clippers won both games. And then in games 3 and 4, he scored 25 a game, or maybe 25 and a half a game. I can't remember which one, but over 20, or at least at 25 a game. And they lose games 3 and 4. There is a trend. shut down Zach Randolph and you shut down the Grizzlies. Let Zach Randolph play to his best potential, and the Grizzlies are going to whip you. I think, though, they stop Zach Randolph, and Chris Paul ends up proving why he's the best guard in the playoffs right now, and possibly the best guard in the entire NBA. And that's why I have the Clippers winning this series in 7 games. I've said it before, though, I could be wrong, and I may have to come back next week and apologize for possibly the Nets and the Bulls. I could be wrong on the Pacers, Hawks. The Celtics could pull off a miracle and win the last 3. Heck, the Rockets could do the same for all I care. I don't know. We'll find out next week, but keep watching those playoffs, and for the Bills and the Bengals' sake, I hope their draft is not as bad as I think it is. Till next week, God bless everybody. Take care.